Кто нам нужен? Нам нужны только штурмовики. 60% моих парней штурмовики, и вы будете одними из них. Тела отвозятся в то место, которое вы указываете в своем завещании. Те, кто приезжает и в первый день говорит, куда-то я не туда попал, мы делаем отметку дезертир, и после этого следует расстрел. У вас есть кто-нибудь, кто может вас десятки срока отсюда зоны вытащить? Как вы думаете?
Imagine you were running a massive hotel with 602,000 guests, but none of them are paying. In fact, you are paying for them. Every single day, you spend about $3.10 on food, medicine, and guards for every single guest. That doesn't sound like much, but when you do the math, that liability was costing the Russian Federal Penitentiary Service over $4 billion a year back in 2017. This was the state of the Russian prison system before the war, a financial black hole. But by late 2023, the ledger changed. The number of prisoners plummeted from 602,000 down to a historic low of roughly 249,000. Where did 350,000 people go? While some of that is reporting methodology, Ukrainian intelligence confirms the core truth. At least 180,000 of them were recruited for the war. Let's look at it like an accountant. By emptying those cells, the Russian Penitentiary Service performed a massive corporate restructuring. According to the data, this reduction allowed the Russian Penitentiary Service to save, or reallocate, approximately $661 million cumulatively in 2022 and 2023. They cut their overhead by over 54%. It was the ultimate inventory clearance. But here is the thing about liquidation sales. You usually sell your inventory for pennies on the dollar just to get rid of it. So if the prison system is just the warehouse and the war is the market, did Russia actually make a profit on these men? Or did the cost of equipping them and shipping them to the meat grinder outweigh the savings of keeping them behind bars? The answer lies in the economics of the meat grinder. To understand this, you have to look at a regular Russian soldier like a product, for example, the iPhone. If the Russian armed forces recruit a regular contract soldier, they are on the hook for a lot of money. You have a signing bonus of $3,300, $10,000 for training, over $53,000 for a 2-year contract salary. And that's before we even talk about the $11,000 in pension accruals or the $3,000 demobilization pay. A single regular soldier, an iPhone, costs the state roughly $66,508 just to get started. Multiply that by 180,000 troops, that is a liability of nearly $12 billion. Now compare that to the prisoner. The prisoner is a burner phone. You pick it up cheap, you use it for a dirty job, and when it breaks, you throw it away. On paper, Russia promised these men the moon. Signing bonuses up to $4,400, salaries of $2,000 a month, and a death benefit of 5 million rubles, about $55,000. But promises are not payments. The reality, exposed by NGOs like Russia Behind Bars, is a bureaucratic scam. The signing bonuses were slashed by 60%. The monthly wages are routinely withheld after the first month, especially for troops marked as expendable or HIV positive. And the death benefits? To pay out that $55,000, a family needs a death certificate stamped "Killed in Action." The field evidence shows that tens of thousands of dead prisoners are listed simply as missing or deserter. No body, no stamp, no stamp, no money. When we calculate what was actually paid, averaging the slashed bonuses and the 1 month of salary they usually survive to collect, the cost per prisoner is only about $3,665. Total spent on 180,000 prisoners, roughly $656 million. Total cost if they had been regular soldiers, $11.9 billion. The net difference? Russia saved $11.3 billion. To put that into perspective, that's 6.53% of the entire Russian defense budget in 2022. They replaced $12 billion worth of iPhones with $500 million worth of burner phones. And, according to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, they drove the crime rate down to its lowest level in 16 years, with only 940,500 criminal cases in the first half of 2025. Why? Because, as Prigozhin said, dead prisoners don't reoffend. But economics has a rule. There is no such thing as a free lunch. You can wipe the financial debt and you can clear the prison cells, but what happens to a society that recycles its criminals into soldiers? What happens when the 35% who survive the grinder come back home? The answer is the Boomerang Effect. Prigozhin sold this as spiritual cleansing by blood, a spiritual transaction, but the data suggests it's actually a recycling loop.
In 2023 alone, Mediazona reported that crimes committed by Russian military personnel spiked by 900%. We aren't talking about petty theft, we're talking about murder, rape, and armed robbery. Independent analysis suggests the real potential for reoffending sits closer to 60%. That is nearly 38,000 men who know how to use firearms, who suffer from PTSD, and whose patriotism was disillusioned by the recruitment bureaucracy and its false promises. Russian state has found a solution for this too. It's a revolving door. In regions like Belgorod and Rostov, prosecutors have already registered cases where amnestied fighters committed new crimes, got arrested, and instead of going to prison, they simply signed a second military contract. The system extracts the violence from the man, points it at Ukraine, and if he survives to be violent at home, they just point him back at Ukraine. Vladimir Putin himself called this repeat offending by pardoned fighters inevitable but minimal. In the end, more than $1.3 billion USD saved by Federal Penitentiary Service, up to $12 billion USD diverted by the Russian armed forces, at least 180,000 new easy soldiers, and the criminal rate reduced to its lowest in 16 years. It's easy to look at this from the West and see it as pure barbarism. But recently, the conversation has shifted closer to home. Louis Sarkozy, son of the former French president, recently made headlines suggesting putting in place a lottery-based system of transferring 10% of randomly selected immigrants into the French army. It echoes the doctrine of the French Foreign Legion, where any foreigner can obtain French nationality after a 5-year contract, principle called Français par le sang versé, or French by spilled blood. When you look at the spreadsheets, the temptation is there. Prisons in France are 123% capacity, in Cyprus 132%, in Belgium 113%, and in Slovenia 134%. And the representation of detained foreigners, a topic so dear to the European right. As of 2021, 24.6% in French prisons, 44.2% in Belgium, 31.6% in Slovenian, and 44.3% in Cyprus prisons are foreigners, while the cost to keep a prisoner in the EU averages €131 a day, nearly 50 times higher than the Russian cost of $3.10. A European penal legion would theoretically solve the overcrowding, save billions, and help Ukraine without risking our boys. You can easily build a far-right narrative here. In the end, Ukraine's Shkval Battalion and Russia's Storm Z detachments will remain a phenomenon unique to the post-Soviet reality of this war. And yet, beyond what Sarkozy the Jr. said, the discussions over sending European inmates into prisons abroad are already brewing in Sweden and partially in the United Kingdom.